The weight of the silver wine bottle was a familiar comfort in my hand. Polished, cold, and precise. Just like the room. Just like the man whose glass I was about to fill. I moved with the silent economy of motion that Mr. Du Bois, the manager of Seoul's most exclusive French restaurant, drilled into us. Never a wasted step. Never an unnecessary sound. My focus was on the crystal glass, the deep red liquid I was pouring, the way the light from the chandeliers fractured through it. But my ears were snagged on the conversation at the table. A quiet, tense exchange in Korean between the man in the impeccably tailored charcoal suit and the elegant older woman in beige silk seated across from him. His mother. I understood every word. My father was a diplomat, my childhood a blur of international schools. Korean was the fourth language I'd mastered and the one that now paid my university tuition. The assets in the Jeju province are secured, the woman, Madame Kwan, said, her voice smooth as cream. Clause 62 ensures your succession is uncontested, my son. The family's legacy is protected. Her son, Kwon Min-jun, didn't look at her. His gaze was fixed on the heavy stack of documents between them, bound in dark blue leather. His stillness was absolute, a predator conserving energy. He was spoken of in whispers among the staff, the unseen owner of half of Gangnam, a man who moved through the city's underbelly like a phantom. He looked younger than the legends suggested. Not yet 30. His dark hair was cut with surgical precision, his features sharp, carved from unforgiving stone. Only his eyes, a deep, liquid brown, held a flicker of something other than ice. He nodded, his hand hovering over a fountain pen. And the transfer to the Park Family Trust. A formality, his mother assured him, placing her delicate, ring-laden hand on the document. She tapped a perfectly manicured nail on a paragraph. But the paragraph she tapped was not 62. I saw it from my vantage point, the bolded header clear as day. 74.
Territorial concessions.
My blood went cold. A mistake. It had to be a mistake. Mr. Du Bois's primary rule was to be invisible, a ghost who filled glasses and cleared plates. But my eyes darted from the number on the page to her serene, smiling face, then to his, which was unreadable, trusting. The lie was so blatant, so audacious. She was pointing at one thing while naming another, and he was about to sign it. Something in me, a reckless, stubborn wire of integrity I didn't know I possessed, snapped. As I leaned in to finish the pour, bringing the bottle and my body closer to his sphere of influence, I lowered my voice to a breath, my lips shielded by the curve of the bottle. The words were out before I could stop them. Your mother is lying. I didn't wait for a reaction. I straightened up, placed the bottle on the service tray with a steady hand, and retreated. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the restaurant's quiet symphony of clinking silver and murmured conversations. I had just signed my own death warrant. I was a 20-year-old art history student. A waitress. I had just accused the mother of one of the most dangerous men in South Korea of treason to his face. From across the room, as I pretended to polish cutlery, I watched him. He did not move. His hand remained suspended over the pen. The air around their table grew thick, supercharged with a silence that was louder than any argument. He said something to his mother, too low for me to hear. Her smile tightened, a barely perceptible crack in a flawless porcelain mask. He did not sign. He capped the pen, a small, definitive click that echoed in the vast space of my terror. Then he pushed his chair back, stood and left. His mother, after a moment of frozen composure, followed. I thought that was it. I would be fired. Maybe a black mark on my record, a warning to stay out of business that wasn't my own. I worked through the rest of my shift on pure adrenaline, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped a tray of champagne flutes. At 2 a.m, when the last customer had gone and the kitchen was quiet, I stepped out into the cool, damp air of the alley behind the restaurant. The neon glow of Gangnam felt a world away. I leaned against the brick wall, trying to force my lungs to work properly. That was when the car appeared. A black sedan, so dark it seemed to suck the light out of the alley. It slid to a halt beside me, silent as a shark. The back door opened. A man in a suit, not Minjun, but someone with the same predatory stillness, got out. He didn't speak. He just gestured toward the open door. It wasn't a request. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my numbness. I took a step back. I have nothing to say. Mr. Kwon feels otherwise, the man said, his voice flat. Get in the car, Lena. He knew my name. Of course, he knew my name. The world I had so carelessly breached was not one where details were overlooked. Running was pointless. They would find me. Screaming was useless. No one would help. With a sense of grim inevitability, I walked to the car and slid onto the cool leather of the back seat. The door clicked shut, sealing me inside a world of silent menace and the faint, clean scent of cedarwood. My old life was over. It had ended with 5 whispered words. The penthouse was a cage of glass and steel overlooking the Han River. The entire city of Seoul sprawled below, a glittering, indifferent carpet of lights. Kwon Min-jun stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to me. He was still in the same charcoal suit, but he'd shed the jacket. The white shirt he wore was stretched taut across his shoulders, a canvas of contained power. For 10 minutes he said nothing. I stood by the door where his man had left me, my purse clutched in my hands like a shield. The silence was a weapon, designed to unnerve, to break. I focused on my breathing, on the way the light reflected off the polished marble floor. I would not break. Finally, he turned. His eyes swept over me, analytical and cold. He was not looking at a person. He was examining a problem. You have a name, he said. It was not a question. Lena, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Lena, he repeated, and the way he said it was different. Slower. Each syllable given its own weight. You work at Lucille. You are a student at Yonsei University. Art history. Your father is a mid-level American diplomat currently stationed in Brussels. You speak 4 languages. You have no criminal record, no significant debts. You are, by all accounts, unremarkable. He knew everything. The thoroughness of his investigation was as terrifying as any physical threat. And yet, he continued, taking a step toward me, you did a very remarkable thing tonight. You risked your life to speak 5 words to a stranger. Why? I met his gaze.
He was closer now.
I could see the faint trace of a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, a tiny imperfection in a face that was otherwise flawless. Because I don't like seeing someone walk into a trap. Even a stranger. You believe my mother was trapping me. She pointed to Clause 74 and called it 62. I stated, keeping my tone factual, devoid of emotion. Clause 74 was about territorial concessions. The recipient was listed as the White Tiger Syndicate. I assumed you might want to know that. His expression did not change, but a muscle feathered in his jaw. The White Tigers were his rivals, a brutal organization that had been chipping away at his family's empire for decades. His mother was trying to hand them a province on a silver platter. My mother has guided this family since my father's death, he said, his voice dangerously soft. Her loyalty is absolute. Then she made a mistake. I countered, though we both knew it was a lie. He closed the remaining distance between us. He was tall, and I had to tilt my head back to look at him. The scent of cedar was stronger now, mixed with something else. Smoke. Bergamot. It was clean, masculine, and utterly intimidating. He studied my face, his dark eyes searching for something, a flicker of fear, a hint of deceit. I gave him nothing. What did you hope to gain? He asked. Nothing. I expected to be fired. You could have been killed. The thought did cross my mind, I admitted. That seemed to surprise him. A flicker of something, not warmth, but perhaps respect, entered his eyes. He took a step back, turning to look out at the city again. The tension in the room shifted. It was no longer an interrogation. It was something else. My father was betrayed by his own brother, he said, his voice low, the words meant for the glass and the city beyond. He trusted him. He loved him. He believed that blood was an unbreakable bond. My uncle put 3 bullets in his chest over a shipping route in Busan. He paused, and the silence was heavy with the weight of that memory. This was his wound. The one vulnerability he carried. Betrayal by blood. My mother was all I had left, he murmured. The one person I thought was incorruptible. He didn't believe her anymore. My 5 words had planted a seed of doubt, and his own history was the soil in which it was now taking root. He turned back to me, his face a mask of cold fury. You will stay here. You will not contact anyone. You will not leave this apartment. You are now a piece on the board. And until I decide how to play you, you belong to me. The next few days were a lesson in luxurious imprisonment. The penthouse had everything. A stocked kitchen, a library of books in 4 languages, a closet filled with clothes that mysteriously appeared in my size. But the doors were locked, and the silent men in suits were a constant presence in the hallway. I was a guest. I was a prisoner. Min-jun was a ghost. He would be gone when I woke up, and he would return late at night, his face etched with a weariness that he tried to conceal behind a wall of icy control. We rarely spoke, but I watched him. I saw the way he'd loosen his tie as he stared out at the city, the weight of his empire pressing down on him. I saw the tension in his shoulders when he took calls, his Korean clipped and precise. One evening, I found him in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at a framed photograph on his desk. It was of a younger him, a smiling boy, with his father. She said it was for the best, he said without turning around.
He knew I was there.
She said the white tigers were growing too strong, that a strategic alliance, a small sacrifice, would prevent a war. Jeju province isn't a small sacrifice, I said quietly, stepping into the room. He finally looked at me.
No.
It's a declaration of surrender. He took a long drink of his whiskey. She knows I would never surrender. That was when the first tremor of real, immediate danger struck. My phone, which had been confiscated, was brought to me on a silver tray. It was Min-jun's man. There was an incident at your place of work, he said. A gas leak. An explosion in the kitchen. No one was seriously injured. My blood ran cold. An incident. A gas leak. There were no accidents in this world. It was a message. For him or for me. It was a warning, Min-jun said, his voice hard as granite. They know someone talked. They're closing the circle. I should have been terrified. A part of me was. But another part, the pragmatic, survivalist part, took over. I could have stayed silent, been a passive victim. But that wasn't me. The timeline, I said, my mind racing. When did your mother first propose this deal? He looked at me, surprised by my shift from prisoner to strategist. A month ago. And when did the white tigers start making aggressive moves on your territory in Incheon? About 6 weeks ago, he admitted, his eyes narrowing as he followed my train of thought. She didn't suggest this to prevent a war, I said, stepping closer. She instigated the conflict to give her an excuse to suggest it. She created the problem, so she could sell you the solution. He stared at me, the whiskey glass frozen halfway to his lips. The silence in the room was electric. It was a moment of absolute clarity, a piece of the puzzle clicking into place. He saw it. He saw the depth of the betrayal. And he saw that I had seen it too. He set the glass down with a heavy thud. He walked over to me until we were standing inches apart. The air crackled between us. His gaze was intense, burning. He wasn't looking at a problem anymore.
He was looking at me.
Who are you, Lena? He whispered, the question laced with a dangerous mixture of suspicion and fascination. I held his gaze, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm. This was the moment I could have backed away, pleaded ignorance, begged to be let go. But I didn't. I made a choice. I'm the person who just saved your empire, I said. The question is, what are you going to do about it? That night, the dynamic between us shifted. I was no longer just his prisoner. I was his confidant, the only person who knew the truth about the rot at the core of his family. He began to talk not about feelings, but about strategy. He laid out maps of the city on the massive dining table, marking territories, supply lines, and points of vulnerability. He spoke of loyalty and debt, of the complex web of obligations that held his world together. And I listened. I, the art history student, found myself pointing out patterns he was too close to see. This move here, I'd say, tapping a red circle on the map. It's a feint. It's designed to draw your attention away from the port. Look at the shipping manifests from the last 3 weeks. He would listen, his expression unreadable, and then he would make a call, his voice low and lethal. And every time I was right. A week after the gas leak, he made his move. "We're going to dinner," he announced, dropping a dress box on the bed in my room. With my mother. The dress was black silk, simple and elegant. It felt like armor. As I fastened a pearl earring, my hands trembled slightly. I was being used as bait. I knew it, but I also knew it was necessary. The dinner was at the family estate, a traditional house with sweeping tiled roofs and serene gardens that seemed to mock the tension coiled in the air. Madame Kwan was the image of grace, her smile warm, her eyes cold as ice chips. She greeted Minjun with an affectionate hug. She gave me a polite, dismissive nod. "Minjun, you didn't tell me you were bringing a guest," she said, her voice laced with honeyed poison. "Lena is a consultant," he replied smoothly, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. The touch was brief, professional, but it sent a jolt through me. A claim. She has a remarkable eye for detail. Throughout the meal, I said little. I watched. I listened. I saw the way Madame Kwan's eyes flickered to me whenever I spoke, the subtle tightening of her jaw. I was an anomaly she couldn't place, a variable she hadn't accounted for. The test came after dinner. Minjun sent me to retrieve a file from his car, a simple errand. As I walked down the long, lantern-lit gravel driveway, the night was quiet. Too quiet. A car, its headlights off, suddenly roared around the bend, accelerating directly toward me. There was no time to think. I froze, caught in the sudden, blinding glare as the driver switched on the high beams. This was it. This was how it ended. But then, an arm like a steel band wrapped around my waist, yanking me backward. I stumbled, falling against a hard chest as Minjun pulled us both behind the thick trunk of a ginkgo tree. The car swerved, its tires screeching on the gravel, and sped off into the night. My face was pressed against his shirt. My lungs burned. I could feel the frantic beat of his heart, or maybe it was my own. The scent of him, cedar, smoke, and the cold night air, filled my senses. His body was a shield, solid and warm around me. For a long moment, we stayed like that, the sound of my ragged breathing the only thing breaking the silence. He finally loosened his grip, but didn't let go completely. His hands rested on my arms, holding me steady. "Are you all right?" His voice was rough, a low growl. I nodded, unable to speak. I was shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline and the shocking, undeniable intimacy of his body against mine. That was the moment one of them almost lost the other. He had almost lost his key, his weapon, and I had almost lost my life. Back in the penthouse, the pretense of civility was gone. He was pacing, a caged tiger, his fury a palpable force in the room. "She tried to kill you. She tried to eliminate a threat." I corrected him, my voice surprisingly calm. "Me. To prove it," he bit out, "I need irrefutable proof. Something that will turn my lieutenants against her. Something they cannot deny." His mother's digital life was a fortress. Encrypted servers, private networks. We needed a password. We needed a key. I thought about the woman I'd seen at dinner. Poised, controlled, ruthless. But in her private study, among the cold, modern furniture, there had been one anomaly. A small, hand-painted ceramic bowl holding a single, polished stone. And on the wall, a small, faded photograph of a white Maltese dog. "What was her dog's name?" I asked.
Mignon stopped pacing.
"What?" "The little white dog in the picture in her study. What was its name?" He frowned, digging into a memory.
Bomi.
It meant springtime. The dog died over a decade ago. People like your mother, people who build walls around themselves, they always leave one secret door, I said. Usually, it's shaped like something they once loved. Something pure, before all of this. It was a long shot, an intuitive leap based on a semester of art history and human psychology. But it felt right. He looked at me, a strange expression on his face. He made a call. An hour later, his top technician called back.
He was in.
The password was Bomi 1998. What we found was everything. Encrypted emails with the head of the White Tigers. Bank statements showing massive transfers of funds to offshore accounts. A detailed plan to assassinate Min Jun once the Jeju deal was signed, leaving his mother as the grieving, regent ruler of the empire. It was all there in black and white. The ultimate betrayal. I had done it. I had given him the weapon to destroy his own mother. And in doing so, I had crossed a line. I was no longer an innocent bystander. I was an accessory, a co-conspirator. This was my morally gray act, the choice I could never uncross. We stood in the dark study, the damning files glowing on the monitor screen. The city lights seemed distant, cold. He had not moved, had not spoken since the proof had been laid bare. He finally turned to me, his face carved in shadow. The silence between us was not empty. It was filled with everything we couldn't say. No one, he began, his voice barely a whisper, raw and heavy, has ever seen the truth of my world and not run. No one has ever risked anything for me without wanting a piece of my empire in return. I held his gaze. I'm not running, and I don't want your empire. He took a step closer, the space between us shrinking until it was nothing. Then what do you want, Lena? The confession was torn from me, a truth so sharp and dangerous it felt like swallowing glass. I told myself staying was survival, that helping you was the only way to stay alive. I took a shaky breath. I was lying to myself. His eyes darkened. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from my face. His touch was electric, a brand. You are the most disruptive thing that has happened to my organization in a decade, he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. It was not a confession of love. It was something more honest, more perilous. It was a confession of impact. He was admitting I had breached his walls, the ones far more fortified than his penthouse. Before either of us could say more, his phone buzzed. A single text message. He read it, and his entire body went rigid. The cold, lethal controls slammed back into place, but this time it was laced with a chilling fury I had never seen. He looked at me, his eyes black pools of death. She has my sister. The name of the location was whispered to him over a burner phone, a defunct textile warehouse on the outskirts of Incheon. A trap. We both knew it. Madame Kwan, cornered and exposed, had made her final, desperate move. She hadn't targeted him. She had taken his half-sister, Jisoo, a university student deliberately kept separate from his world, a girl he quietly protected from a distance. A girl I didn't even know existed. His soldiers were already moving, a silent, disciplined army mobilizing in the night. But Min Jun wasn't going in with brute force. My mother knows how I fight, he said, his voice a low, controlled hum of rage as he checked the magazine of a sleek black pistol. She'll be expecting an army. She won't be expecting you. My heart seized. Me? What can I do? You are the one thing she can't predict, he stated, his eyes locking onto mine. You are my chaos variable. His plan was insane. He and a small team would create a diversion at the south entrance. In the confusion, I was to go in through a northern maintenance tunnel, armed with nothing but a burner phone and the information I held. My job was not to rescue. It was to destabilize. The head of the White Tigers is named Chairman Park, Min Jun explained, his hands gripping my shoulders, his intensity a physical force. He's greedy. My mother promised him Jeju. What she didn't tell him is that the land is worthless without the port access, which she transferred to a shell corporation in her name 2 days ago. It's in the documents we found. She was going to betray him, too. This was my weapon. Not a gun, but a truth. The ride to Incheon was a silent, high-speed blur. When we arrived, The warehouse loomed against the night sky, a skeletal silhouette. The air smelled of salt and decay. Minjun turned to me in the darkness of the car. He handed me an earpiece. "Stay on the line. I will hear everything." He paused, his hand cupping my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek. The gesture was shockingly tender. "Lena, do not be a hero. Be a distraction. Sow chaos. I will do the rest." My part was terrifyingly simple. I walked right up to the front entrance, unarmed, my hands raised. I was the consultant, the girl who had been at the family dinner. I was unexpected. They took me, of course, binding my wrists with a zip tie and dragging me into the cavernous main floor. The scene was exactly as Minjun had predicted. Chairman Park, a portly man with cruel eyes, stood with his men on one side. Madame Kwan stood on the other, a picture of cold elegance, while a terrified young woman who must be Jisoo stood beside her, a soldier's arm tight around her throat. "The American girl," Madame Kwan said, her lip curling in distaste. "My son's pet. Did you come to beg for your life?" I ignored her, my eyes fixed on Chairman Park. I had to act decisively. I had to be the one to change the direction of the story. "He's not coming for me," I said, my voice ringing out in the echoing space. "He's coming for his sister. But he sent me to deliver a message to you, Chairman Park." Park grunted, intrigued. "What message?" "He wants to know if you've read the fine print on your deal for Jeju," I said, projecting a confidence I did not feel. "The part about the port access at Halim. Did Madame Kwan mention she transferred it to a private company in Macau 2 days ago? The land she gave you is landlocked. Worthless." The shift in the room was instantaneous. Park's face clouded with suspicion. He turned to Madame Kwan. "Is this true?" "She's lying." Madame Kwan snapped, her composure finally cracking. A desperate trick from a desperate girl? But the seed was planted. I saw it in the eyes of Park's men. They knew the kind of game they were in. Betrayal was their native language. That was when the explosion rocked the south side of the warehouse. The diversion. In the ensuing chaos, as men shouted and drew weapons, I did the one thing they didn't expect. I wasn't a passive victim to be rescued. I lunged forward, not at a soldier, but at the rickety table beside Madame Kwan. I kicked it over, sending a stack of papers and a heavy crystal ashtray crashing to the floor. The ashtray shattered, and I dropped to my knees, my bound hands fumbling for the largest, sharpest shard of glass. A soldier grabbed for me, but I was already moving, slicing the shard against the zip tie. It cut through. My hands were free. The soldier holding Jisoo was distracted, his head turned toward the sound of gunfire. I didn't hesitate. I surged to my feet, grabbed a heavy iron pipe leaning against a pillar, and swung it with all my strength at the back of his knees. He howled, his leg buckling, and his grip on Jisoo loosened. It was the opening Minjun needed. Gunshots, precise and methodical, erupted from the rafters above. His team was in position. The firefight was short, brutal, and ruthlessly efficient. When the silence fell, Minjun was there, standing over the wounded form of Chairman Park. His men had Jisoo, pulling her to safety. He walked past his mother, who stood frozen in shock and defeat, and came directly to me. He surveyed the scene, the pipe in my hands, the blood on my knuckles from the broken glass, the fierce, defiant look in my eyes. He reached out and gently took the pipe from my grasp, setting it aside. His gaze was no longer cold or analytical. It was filled with a raw, undeniable acknowledgement. "I told you that you were dangerous," he said, his voice low and rough, for my ears only. "I was wrong." He cupped my face, his touch both a comfort and a claim. "You are lethal. And you are mine." The cost was absolute. My old life was a ghost, a memory of a girl who worried about art history exams and tips. That girl was gone, burned away in a warehouse in Incheon. I could never go back. My name, my face, my very existence were now bound to his. I had traded my quiet future for a place at the center of his violent, glittering world. A cost paid in full. Weeks later, I stood on the balcony of his penthouse. The city lights of Seoul glittered below, a kingdom of shadows he commanded. His mother was gone, exiled to a remote estate, stripped of her name and power, a punishment far crueler than death in her world. His empire was secure. He came to stand behind me, his presence a familiar weight in the air. He didn't touch me, but I could feel the heat of his body, a silent promise of protection and possession. The night was cool, but I was not cold. I had whispered a warning to a dangerous stranger, thinking I was doing a simple, right thing. I never imagined that in saving him from his mother's trap, I would be walking into a different one entirely, one forged of loyalty, danger, and a connection that defied all logic. Looking out at the sprawling, infinite lights, I felt the last vestiges of my fear dissolve, replaced by a quiet, startling certainty. I was not a prisoner here. I was home. And that choice, made in the crucible of violence and betrayal, was the most dangerous truth of all.